Oh yeah. Theaters are, of course, entirely empty, the end of her career. The bliss of total stupidity and narcissism.
Rachel Zegler is in complete meltdown after her London play flopped so hard, even the seats were embarrassed to be empty. It's tragic. One person's ego managed to sink an entire production and burn through a mountain of money in the process. At this point, casting Rachel is like signing a disaster clause before the script's even written.
Rachel Zegler, who stars as Snow White, condemned Prince Charming as weird and a stalker, adding that she hates the original. Nice start. Leaked photos from the set revealed that the 7 dwarves had been sensationally axed, replaced by multiracial, gender non-specific.
And honestly, it's one thing to flop at the box office. It's another to walk into one of London's most prestigious theaters and be greeted by a sea of green dots on the booking chart. Over 74% of tickets left unsold. That's not a bad week. That's a crisis. Rachel Zegler's big comeback wasn't just underwhelming, it was invisible.
It's no longer 1937, and we absolutely wrote a Snow White that is
saved by the prince.
She's not going to be saved by the prince, and she's not going to be dreaming about
she's gonna die.
true love.
She was cast as Eva Peron in the iconic musical Evita, a role that should have been a standing ovation moment. But instead of applause, she got silence. The London Palladium, with its 2,286 seat capacity, looked more like a rehearsal space than a live show. And no, this wasn't some random Tuesday night slump. This was happening across multiple nights, across weeks.
Rachel Zegler on the docket is, she's an asshole. That's number one.
It is, and it's really mean to put her next to Gal Gadot, who's absolutely stunning.
Yeah.
So
It's not fair.
Discounted tickets at $29.50, a literal bargain in London's theater scene, still couldn't fill the room. And that's the part that hurts most. People weren't staying away because of some organized boycott. There weren't angry mobs or aggressive hashtags. It was worse. They just didn't care. The same public that once might have given her the benefit of the doubt after Snow White. They didn't even show up to see if she'd redeem herself. They had Evita, a beloved musical. They had cheap tickets.
She's young and she's dumb, but maybe she'll learn. You know what? Whatever I called her, it worked. She's had a long history of saying woke, annoying things. Our news.
They had time, and they still said, no thanks. That's not protest, that's apathy. And in this industry, apathy is the kiss of death. What makes this sting even more is how the show itself was never the problem. Evita is a classic. It sells itself. But not this time. Rachel's name wasn't the draw. It was the deterrent. Every poster, every promo, every ticket with her name on it was a reminder of the PR disaster she'd just come from. She wasn't lifting the production. She was sinking it. A show that should have been bulletproof ended up bleeding ticket sales all over the floor.
And it instantly became the #1 most downvoted trailer in the history of the platform. That might be a humbling experience.
Now, here's where it gets painfully symbolic. A video started circulating online. Rachel, alone in a movie theater, watching Snow White. No fans, no press, just her. That clip has now become the visual metaphor of her entire career trajectory. Swap out the cinema chairs for theater seats, and you've got the same energy. One performer, hundreds of empty chairs, and a silence so thick it screams.
Is actually so bad that Rachel Zegler decided to post,
The thing about live theater, you can't fake it. There's no editing room, no studio sound, no TikTok filter to soften the blow. It's raw, it's real, and when people don't show up, you feel it in your bones. When she stepped on stage and looked out at those vacant rows, it wasn't just a disappointing night. It was a live-action reminder that the audience has already moved on.
theater totally empty.
And this all happened because of a reason. There was no misquote, no context taken out of proportion. Rachel Zegler, in her own words, called the original Snow White weird and referred to the prince as a stalker. This wasn't some leaked clip or a paparazzi ambush. It was part of her official Snow White press tour, repeated across multiple interviews between 2022 and 2023. She didn't just criticize the old storyline, she turned it into a public punching bag.
Look at this. Look at this face. What can be said about this level of narcissism? Here, please, enjoy.
What audiences heard wasn't empowerment. It was arrogance wrapped in activism. There's a difference between updating a fairy tale and mocking it. And Rachel didn't just reject the classic elements. She laughed at them. In one interview, she smirked while explaining how her version of Snow White doesn't need a man. But in doing so, she reduced one of Disney's most beloved stories to a joke. People didn't see progress. They saw a complete lack of respect for the emotional core of the film, and for the fans who still held it dear.
Look at the bliss. On some level, it's got to be a blessing to just be so smooth-brained and to not truly understand that.
And then came the interviews. Not just one, but an entire tour filled with the same energy. What should have been light, fun, promotional Q&As turned into mini lectures on feminism, gender politics, and outdated storytelling. Commenters online started calling it Rachel's TED Talk Tour, because instead of talking about the music, costumes, or magic of Disney, she spent most of her time tearing apart the source material. It didn't feel like a promotion. It felt like a takedown by the lead actress herself.
Is sitting in an empty movie theater watching her movie, giggling hysterically and maniacally.
At the same time, Disney was quietly bleeding money. According to Variety and Deadline, by late 2023, the Snow White production had ballooned to nearly $600 million. That includes reshoots, marketing, and all the delays caused by the pandemic and internal creative clashes. When the film was finally test screened, the backlash had already been building. And by the time it hit limited international markets in early 2024, it was clear this wasn't going to be a win.
Her box office flop, Snow White, in an empty theater, the level of delusion should be studied, actually. I'm getting serial killer vibes. Yeah, people better be careful around Rachel Zegler is happily watching Snow White in an empty theater.
By the end of its global run, Snow White had reportedly brought in only $200 million worldwide, a loss of nearly $400 million depending on the final marketing spend. That kind of figure doesn't just trigger disappointment, it triggers restructuring. Within weeks, insiders confirmed that Disney had shelved its planned live-action remake of Tangled. No announcement, no press release, just a quiet disappearance of development updates. Rachel was tied to both headlines, and while she wasn't directly blamed by Disney, she became the public face of a brand disaster.
It's always in the eyes, man. It's always in the eyes. If you cover up the mouth and you look at just the eyes, no, you see evil, in fact. Right? If you look at just the eyes, it's evil.
Florence Pugh had been rumored to play Rapunzel, but even her rising star power wasn't enough to calm the storm of backlash. The Tangled remake was seen as another modernized, politically loaded redo, and after Snow White, fans weren't having it. Disney saw the writing on the wall and pulled the plug. One actress, 2 destroyed fairy tales, and a fan base that wanted none of it.
Nightmarish disasters for the brand that made Lizzo canon in Star Wars. I'll never forget it.
And let's not think it all ended there, because when Gal Gadot speaks, people don't just listen. They read between the lines. In a post-production interview about Snow White, Gal, who played the evil queen, didn't throw a tantrum, didn't rant, didn't even raise her voice. She simply said, "There was no teamwork." And with that, everybody in the room and on the internet knew exactly who she was pointing at. It wasn't vague. It wasn't cryptic. It was clean, polished, and surgically precise. That one phrase carried more weight than any blog headline or blind item ever could.
Then Rachel Zegler? I don't know. Could it be worse? Just a reminder, there's a reason why Disney is failing.
She didn't stop there. Gal went on to call the entire filming process exhausting and disappointing. And while she never dropped names, it didn't take a detective to fill in the blanks. There were only 2 major leads on that set. One of them kept her head down. The other spent a year publicly undermining the legacy of the story, calling the prince a stalker, rewriting love as oppression, and delivering press interviews like she was preparing for a United Nations summit. If you're wondering who Gal was disappointed in, it wasn't the lighting team. Sources close to the production started whispering what the cameras didn't show. According to multiple insiders across social media and fan forums in early 2024, Gal and several crew members had grown frustrated with Rachel Zegler's behavior on set. Not for diva antics or late arrivals, but for something worse in Hollywood, a lack of collaboration. Word was Rachel had very little interest in team chemistry. Everything was her version, her vision, her modern interpretation. But when you're cast in a billion-dollar franchise reboot, your version has to include everyone else, especially your co-stars.
Then he used Comic Sans. That wasn't offensive enough. He used Comic Sans in his apology. Got it. Nobody believed it. Disney, of course.
What makes Gal's comment so damaging isn't just the content, it's the delivery. It came from a global box office powerhouse who has never been caught in scandal, never played the villain, and never stirred up drama online. Gal's brand is diplomatic, measured, and, most importantly, listened to. When she says something went wrong, people don't question it. They assume it's a fact, and that makes her subtle shade 10 times more devastating than any direct call-out. And that's when the ghosting started. The first person to disappear? Steven Spielberg. The same Spielberg who handpicked Rachel from thousands of audition tapes for West Side Story. The man who launched her into stardom with the kind of endorsement most actors wait a lifetime for. Went silent. No tweets, no statements, no damage control. The same director who once called her a once-in-a-generation voice had nothing to say when her voice started drowning in controversy. That silence didn't go unnoticed.
In the line of reasons why Disney deserves to crumble and be destroyed, item number 1 is the destruction of all of our childhood IPs. Whether you're a Snow White person, that's your thing.
Then came Evita. In an industry where even bad productions get hyped through glossy behind-the-scenes content, Rachel's stage co-stars didn't post a single thing. And that's how the machine moves. Quietly, efficiently, strategically. Her name started disappearing from future casting rumors, replaced by newer faces with less baggage. When casting leaks or speculative headlines dropped for upcoming Disney or Warner Brothers projects in late 2024, Rachel's name wasn't in the mix. No one puts out a press release saying your moment is over. They just stop calling your agent. Your name stops appearing on the whiteboards in casting rooms. The next movie you thought you were lined up for suddenly has creative changes. The press stops requesting interviews, and when they do mention you, it's as a cautionary tale, not a success story. So, is Hollywood finally ghosting Rachel Zegler for good? Or is there still time to turn this around? Let us know what you think in the comments.